Welcome to the Signal Pres podcast.
Welcome to the Signal Pres podcast, the place for you to learn, to grow, and to get connected to the body of Christ here at Signal Pres. I'm Joey Sherrod. I'm one of your hosts.
And I am Abby Hutto. I am also one of your hosts.
And we're down here in the podcast studio. It's good that we're down here because things were a little dicey for Signal Pres earlier this afternoon. There was a fire alarm.
Oh, yeah. I was like, what happened? Yes, there was. And I want everyone to know that no one came to get us out of our offices, and we could have died had there actually been a fire.
That's true. You can't be denied. But it's also true that none of us left our offices as well.
It's true. I did leave and saw no one else was there and thought, oh, I wonder what's going on. But then Barbara, always so very helpful, was like, it's okay. Go back to your office. It's nothing.
Yeah.
So
great.
So
Barbara,
then I looked
Barbara
out,
Haley.
I looked out the window, saw all the student ministry staff out there and laughed at them and knocked on the window. I was like, it's cold.
You guys are rule followers. What a bunch of dorks.
They're the ones who will live.
Fair enough.
Yeah, but we're okay.
We're okay.
Yeah.
It's good.
Nothing
It's fine.
happened.
Yes, we're good to go. But we're also here today. So thankfully, the building is still
I was
intact.
like,
Everything's fine.
How are you going to segue?
Everything's fine.
Here it comes.
Which means we can answer your Bible questions.
That's right. We have a question, and I would call it answer episode, but it's probably just question, and we got some things to say about that episode. I don't know that we're going to actually be answering a whole lot, but we got some things to say about that.
We do.
We do.
We do. Yeah. So listeners, thanks for submitting your questions. They're always great. And so we have on this episode two first-time questioners.
Yeah,
That's
we
right.
do. So our first question comes from the reading in Genesis. So our friend sent this in back when we were on Genesis 20. So it was a couple weeks ago, but we had other things in the lineup. So we're getting to that, and we're so happy that she sent this in because it is a great question. So Here is the question. Joey, why did...
That was not in the person's email.
No.
Email came to Abby.
But we're going to ask Joey first. Why did Abraham fear for his life and say Sarah was his sister in this instance in Genesis chapter 20? Because if you remember, he's done this before, and now he has done it a second time in Genesis chapter 20. And our listener helpfully pointed out that right before this, the chapter right before this, is the promise that that God will give a son to Abraham through Sarah. So Abraham is aware at this point that the child is not going to be a servant in his home who inherits his estate. It won't be his son Ishmael. It will be a child who is born of Sarah. So he knows this, and yet she says, didn't he believe God's promise of a son through Sarah? So, Joey, help us navigate the inner workings of the heart of Abraham. And help us understand this. Because this is kind of, okay, let's just be honest. This is just weird, right? You're like clicking along and Abraham's being really amazing. And you're like, yes, he's getting it. And then boom, he does this again.
Yeah, he does. And again, so back in Genesis 12, Abram and Sarai, those were their names then, they went down to Egypt because of a famine. Similarly, Abram lied about who Sarai was. God intervened with Pharaoh in Genesis 12 and said, he's been lying to you. And then now with Abimelech, same thing happens.
Which does make me think of the Lion King. Abimelech, 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 Abimelech. Come on, here's your part. Do you not think of that when you hear that name?
I
Well,
hadn't
you will
before,
now.
but now doomed to doing that every time I read Genesis.
There's your Disney movie
There you go.
All right, Abimelech.
Abimelech. Yeah, I mean, so it's strange and yet oh so familiar, right? Because I do think it's, on the one hand, it's illustrating a principle that on the most broadest level, it illustrates a principle that we all know so well. We often fall back into patterns that we, in our moments of clarity, we think, I will never do that again.
Yeah. Yes.
And yet we do.
And
so Abraham, out of fear of how the king would treat him, he lies again. So, yeah, on the one hand, it's just a picture of kind of the reality of indwelling sin in our lives, that we're in constant need of God's grace. We don't graduate out of our sin patterns, even while we do make progress. But on the other hand, I mean, this is what I just love about Hebrew Bible narrative. I mean, we've talked about this. If you were in one of our studies on 1st and 2nd Samuel, this is one of the things we said quite a bit, is that on the one hand, in the Old Testament, when we're reading a historical book, the Bible shows more than it tells, right? So that we can't expect these sort of editorial comments and this is what this story means, right? Which is just good pedagogy, right? Like we're more likely when the narrative invites us in and we have to inhabit and say, what's going on here? We're more likely to learn more. But also sometimes the narrative, like the authors of Scripture will just give us these phrases, and if they seem odd to us, or just what they do give us means a lot. And when I looked at Genesis 20, when I was doing this reading plan myself, what happens in verse 13 when Abimelech asks Abraham to defend, like, why have you done this, right? And he gives a litany of reasons, why this, well, gosh, I didn't think that, you guys respected God. There's a way in which this was just like a half truth.
Yeah. She's my half sister.
Right. Yeah. Exactly.
There's so much. When you start to do this isn't a sign, Abraham's family tree, and you realize that like he married his half sister and then his son marries his cousin, like their tree is just very like, it looks like a Mississippi family tree. Not a lot of branches.
That's right. It's a pine tree.
Oh, anyway, sorry.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Well, yeah, but then at the end of that, he says this thing where he says in verse 13, and when God caused me to wander from my father's house, which is not an accurate narration of what happened. I mean, God didn't make him do that. God invited him into this. So I think part of what we're seeing is there's this thing that really is an echo of how Adam and Eve both responded in the garden, right? The serpent made me do it, and then I think Adam's literal words are, the woman you gave me.
This is your fault, God.
Right. and that's what Abraham is doing. He's basically saying, like, there's this note of fatigue, right? Which we can imagine, even if it doesn't justify his actions. Like, he has been a nomad. Yeah. He's left everything, and now he's on his way. And, you can just sense some tiredness in him, like basically like, and you just keep making me do these things.
Yeah. And it's been a really long time since God made the promise to him that he would have a son and an heir.
Right.
And like the very next chapter is the birth of Isaac, but it's been like 25 years. So it's a really long time to obey without seeing the fruit of what you long for.
Absolutely. Yeah. So. And it's just good to be reminded. And I think what you said is really helpful, is that these are not two-dimensional characters. Like they are, real complex people who have seasons of, incredible faithfulness that we see in Abraham when he believes God, and then they also have seasons where, their faith kind of grows thin. And that's what we see that. So I think, our listener and question asker was right to name the contradiction, between the promise being renewed and then Abraham basically, disbelieving the promise in some sense, which just sounds a lot like us.
Yeah, it does. Yeah. And hopefully everyone heard my like judgy tone when I was saying it. Because I just think for me, it's so easy to judge. when you see it on the page, but then when you experience it in your own life, when you see yourself return to habits of sin, places that have been comfortable and safe for you in the past, even though you've seen God do amazing things. I think about like that is a very relatable thing. And so I'm really grateful that we have like a patriarch who is modeling for us, like, this is our human hearts. Like, they are going to grow weary and tired, and we're going to do things we wish we didn't do, and God will still be faithful to us. But one of the things that I noticed in this, as you brought that up, like this revelation that we get this second time of the weariness of his heart, of maybe some resentment towards God, isn't it kind of God to allow him to find himself in that situation again, to hear himself say what's at the root of this? Because a lot of times I think we sin, and then we say, I'm like Scott's sermon was so good on Sunday where he was talking about, like, how do you talk to yourself when you sin? Do you say, I'm going to do better, I'm not going to do this again, I'm going to try harder? Or do you come to God and expect him to be merciful and kind to you? And I think the beauty of, that's a weird way to say this, the beauty of habitual sin is the opportunity it offers us to stop and say, instead of hurrying so quickly to say, I'm not going to do this again, I need to shut off this part of my heart, I need to, like, what can I do to control this? Is to actually stop and say, what's at the root of this? And what do I not believe about God? And what is it that's making my heart weary and tired, and I keep finding myself here? Maybe that's the place the Lord wants to interact with me in kindness and restore me to himself. And because our habitual sins they're called habitual sins because they're the ruts our hearts lean towards when we're tired and discouraged. And only love can fill in those ruts and make a new pathway for us.
Yeah, that's well put. Yeah,
so it's helpful passage.
It's beautiful to see that Abraham's sin does not put an end to God's faithfulness to him.
Yes.
So the very next chapter is the birth of Isaac.
That's right. God protected Sarah and preserved her for the birth of Isaac.
Yeah.
So it's a really, really helpful story.
Yeah.
So that was our question from Genesis. Then we got another question. And this one was super fun because it came to us really in response to the sermon series that we're in. So we really want to encourage you, send us questions, not just from your reading, definitely from your reading, but also if you have questions about the sermon. Hold on. Fill in, Joey.
Yes. And I would say, in addition to what Abby just said, that it's also, if you ask questions from the sermon series, like some of those, the chances that you'll have to hear Scott Bowen again increase, because we're more likely to have him on, because he's the guy who's doing a lot of the sermon preaching. So
yes,
we can bring him back in.
So this one's fun. Okay, so she starts by saying, long-time listener, first-time emailer. And then she talks about the question that she has that has been stirred up from the sermon series. So she says, my question is, could you discuss the relationship between justification by faith, which is what we've been talking about in our Galatians series, and James chapter 2, which talks about our faith being dead if it doesn't also accompany works. So come with works. I'm saying that badly. So let me just read what it actually says in James. Yeah. James chapter 2. So he says, he's in the middle of this, giving examples and talking about like the importance of our obedience. And he says in James 2:17, so also faith by itself, if it does not have works, is dead. So at first glance, this can look like these are contradictory things. So we're justified by our faith, but our faith is dead without works. So how do we reconcile something that might feel a little confusing just at first glance?
Yes. And what a great question. And one of the reasons I think it's a great question is that when we are hearing the gospel clearly, that is the normal question that we ask. So think about the progression of the book of Romans, from Romans 3 to 4 to 5, where Paul is proclaiming, the righteousness of God that comes apart from works, and you get to Romans 6:1, and basically Paul voiced the question that he imagines his ears asking, which is basically, does this mean that we can just do whatever the heck we want?
Yeah. That is the natural response to the gospel.
Right. Yeah. So that is the right answer. And when we read these letters, there's a couple things going on. On the one hand, we are reading them slowly on Sunday mornings, right? So what, I don't know how long it would take you to sit down and read the book of Galatians in one sitting, but it probably wouldn't be a semester.
No.
Right? So when we come to Galatians 3:1-6, and we talk about, a pastor like Scott did this past Sunday when he, explains it and exposits it, he's expositing the passage that's in front of us, right? And that he's not expositing the entire book, although he's doing it within, the framework of thinking about all of God's truth and all of God's scriptures, right? But he's focusing on that particular passage. And so when we think about, we don't talk about everything at all at once, right? And so when we continue on through Galatians, we're going to get to things about what is the place of our of works. We'll get to more of that. And
so to your point, though, you're saying the original, I just want to clear this up to make sure we all hear what you're saying. The original recipients of this letter would have heard it read from start to finish in one sitting.
Right. Yes.
Yeah. And that makes a lot of sense that it would not have been as confusing for them. Maybe.
Yeah. Well, they would have. They probably would have the same question as this that our friend asked, but it would have been answered in 15 minutes rather than 15 weeks.
I wonder if when they were reading the letter to the Romans, they gave a bathroom break halfway through, because that's a really long one.
It is. Yes, truth.
All right. So, but we're hearing it in sections and chunks.
That's right. Yeah, exactly. And it's also the case that every letter is addressing a specific pastoral issue within a different congregation. And so Paul might focus on one thing for one particular hearer and one particular problem within a congregation and focus on something else, right? And so who James was writing to and who and what the Galatians needed. Very different things.
Different
right?
things, yeah.
But all that to say, when I think about the relationship between faith and works, there are a lot of different things to say. I guess the two things that initially come to mind, first of all, when we talk about the relationship with the works, it's important to distinguish them, but not separate them, right? And so when we think about the language that in the question that we got, justification by faith, right? Justification, we've heard it in the Westminster Shorter Catechism on Sunday mornings a couple times, I think. I mean, justification is an act of God whereby he takes guilty sinners and puts them in right relationship with himself. That's my paraphrase of it. It's once and for all. It is what we might call like a legal reality. So like apart from what is like actually true about us, we are sinners. We are unrighteous. Like God legally makes us righteous, declares us righteous. That is a one-time act. Now, that is just one part of the Christian life, right? So if we were to think about the order of salvation, there's a number of things that happen. We're united to Christ by faith. Like we are, God regenerates our hearts. We begin to desire good things, and hate bad things. That's a process that unfolds. We are adopted. We become, children of the Father, and he treats us as a father treats his sons and daughters. But one of the other things is he sanctifies us. And that is while justification is a one-time act, sanctification is an ongoing process in the Christian life. That is connected to justification, right? All of this comes at once, right? But is distinct as well. And it's just so important that we don't confuse them, right? That we don't begin to base our justification on our sanctification. Yeah. We don't evaluate our justification based on our sanctification, which is to say, when we think about faith and works, the order of it matters, right? Yeah. So we are justified by faith. And when we are justified by faith, like we are credited with Jesus's righteousness, and we are no longer wondering what our God thinks about us, right? We know what his posture is like. We know what his favor is for us. Works then flow out of that life. They don't precede it. Like, so our works don't earn us our justification, because our works don't amount to anything that could possibly do that. We're justified only because of our trust in Jesus and what he's done for us. But out of that justification, then new life flows, and works is one of those things that is the mark of that new life. So I think someone like Luther said something like, we're saved by faith alone, but the faith that saves doesn't come alone.
Yeah.
Which is to say, it comes with like a desire to please our Father who's been so good for us, to praise him with our lives, offering them up as a sacrifice of praise. Sin's power has been broken in our life, and so we begin to respond and obey, not because it's going to earn us God's love, but because we have God's love.
That's right. Yeah, I like how, it's not Keller's original thought, but I heard it in his study on Galatians, where he talks about the difference between passive righteousness and active righteousness. So the passive righteousness is what we receive that we do absolutely nothing to earn, is the righteousness that is given to us because of the work of Jesus on our behalf. And then from that, our lives, as we are sanctified, become more actively righteous. We are leaving behind sin and embracing, putting off the flesh, embracing the Spirit and the Spirit's work in our lives. And I think that can just get really confusing in the muddled upness of everyday life. I remember when we were studying that book, my friend and I were talking about our plans for Easter, and she was our pastor's wife, and she had just started a new ministry within the last few years that took her out and on the road a lot. And so she was asking me, what are you doing for Easter? And I was like, oh, we're having all these different families over. And like her face fell, and she was like, oh, I used to do that, before I had to travel so much for work. And I felt sad for her because I didn't want her to feel bad about herself. So I was like, hey, you know what? You did that for so many years, and that's fine. You don't need to worry about it. Like, you've done your time, and like other people can pick that up now, and it was me saying something that is a very natural thing to say because I was trying to encourage her, but I could tell like it just didn't make her feel better. So later on that night, we were at our Galatians Bible study, and we were talking about the difference between active and passive righteousness, and I was teaching on it. And in the middle of the teaching, I just looked at her and I was like, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. Like, I just tried to comfort you with your active righteousness of the past that you're no longer doing.
Right.
Instead of just saying, the Lord loves you and he's got you, and your preciousness in the kingdom is not based on how many people you have over for Easter lunch. Right. Yeah. And like, we both just laughed about it because she was like, yeah, that's why that didn't feel good. It's like, yes.
Yeah.
Because we do that. When we fail, we often try to make ourselves feel better by thinking about the things that we do well. But if we're honest, that's a shorter list than all of our failings. Yeah. And what we really need to remember is our passive righteousness, what has been done for us that cannot be taken from us. Yeah. And I think that's just a very helpful distinction in my mind when I think about when I struggle with feeling discouraged and upset with myself. What am I trying to comfort myself with? All the things I've done great in the past, that's cold comfort. It's not going to last very long. Right. The passive righteousness that I receive from Jesus, though, that is what is lasting and real.
Yeah.
And comforting.
That's great. Yeah. And I think there is it might not look any different on the outside, but on the inside, there is something very different about works that are done because we think we can earn righteousness versus works that are done like because we have acceptance, right? Like the heart that says this has to go well, because everything is on the line. Yeah. Versus the heart that says nothing's on the line. It's all been settled. And now I can just do this. Like if my plans change, if people cancel, like just using that example you gave, like if our toilet backs up and we have to cancel, like it's just fine. Like, cause I'm not justified by how many people come to my house for Easter. Now I can be okay.
That's just more ham from me.
The ham is good. It's a honey baked ham, right?
No other kind.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, there's more to be said about this, but I would just say that if it sounds hard, it's because we spend our entire lives trying to balance this,
Yeah.
you know, and oftentimes, like, you know, the normal experience of my Christian life is to be, you know, is to be trying to obey Jesus and then at some point realizing I'm just doing it for the wrong reason.
Yeah.
Because I'm trying to prove myself to him,
Yeah.
you know? And so if it sounds hard, it's not necessarily, I mean, it is hard to kind of wrap our minds around it, but the real hard part is to live it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Oh, and we often do it wrong and then realize like, oh, this is exhausting.
That's right.
Why do I feel so tired? Because I'm resting on my active righteousness, not the passive righteousness of Jesus. All right. So that came to us from our sermon. And we have one more little just tidbit topic from the book of Acts. So we've been reading through Genesis. We have some questions from that we've covered. And we're also in the book of Acts right now in our reading plan. So Joey, what are some things that would be helpful for us as we think through Acts and kind of some of the main themes or things that we're seeing?
Yeah. You know, I think sometimes it's helpful just to kind of zoom out a little bit. I mean, we're reading whole chapters, which is sometimes feels like a lot. Some of these chapters are like, oh my gosh.
Especially when the author is Luke and he has many, many verses.
That's right.
Many, many verses.
He does. Yes.
He's not like Mark, a man of few words.
Yeah, Mark's, let's get to the point. But so sometimes it's nice just to zoom out a little bit. And one of the things I heard another pastor talking about this recently it was fun to hear that and then to notice it as I was reading the book of Acts. Acts is the story of the early days of the New Covenant church after the gift of the Spirit. And I think sometimes we can have this pristine picture of the church, you know, we can think about like, you know, if you ever have been a part of a church plant or a college ministry, it's always like, we're going to be like Acts 2.
That's right.
You know, we're going to eat. We're going to study the word.
That's right.
And then, but the more you read Acts, you're like, oh, this place was a hot mess.
Yeah. Yes, it was and is.
And
still.
That's right. And some of that is because, you know, the Spirit was on the move. And so Satan had it in its sights. Right. And I think about Acts 4, 5, and 6. The pastor who I was listening to said, these are Satan's 3 strategies against the church. Chapter 4 is persecution. So the apostles, they're preaching the gospel. They're called by the high priests in Jerusalem, and they're told, you know, basically, you know, how did you do this? And then you need to stop doing this.
Yeah.
And I think they're beaten at some point in that. But they resist persecution and they pray in response to that. And in response to that, God strengthens them and, you know, sort of refreshes them in ministry. But persecution is, you know, and that can come in all different forms. You know, currently we don't live in a time and culture where persecution is the normal experience of Christians. But for some people today, it very much is, right? The second strategy is, I think, inner division or deception. This is Ananias and Sapphira in Acts 5. So they come, they sell property, and then they lie about what it is that they've done. And I think Satan's strategy is to basically that the church should ease up on its call to holiness, right? And so sometimes that's Satan's strategy is to, you know, the apostles resist that. They, you know, they say, don't lie to the Holy Spirit, right? That line comes up because the Spirit dwells in the church. But convictingly, the third strategy that Satan has, we see in Acts 6, which is busyness, right? So at the beginning of Acts 6, there's this disagreement about how things should be distributed to those who are in need. And the 12, they're, you know, they say like, we could spend all our time doing this, but this is not our particular vocation. You know, it's not right that we should give up preaching the word of God to serve tables. That's in verse 2 of chapter 6. And that is a real strategy that Satan has, right? Is that, that we get distracted from our main vocations. Now, we all have different vocations, and, and God didn't say that this isn't your business, right? He said, no, some people should have this.
Yeah.
And this,
it's not that serving tables was beneath them.
Right.
It was that they were called to something else.
That's right. Yes,
because
exactly.
Jesus served.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, that's right. Yeah. And they served in their own ways, but there was a sense of like, here's what each person is called to do. And sometimes we can get distracted from that for various reasons. And when I heard that, I just thought that was just a helpful way for me to zoom out from my reading a little bit and just see, okay, like here's what's happening in the book of Acts, which, Luke, he did have lots of verses and lots of chapters, but he is an elegant writer, and he's all up to all sorts of neat things like that and more. So.
Yeah. So when you think about that for our context, so the three things: persecution, the enemy gets us by persecuting us, by creating division and turmoil within us, and by busyness. How do you think that shows up, like for our people? Like I know we talked about like the persecuted church. That may be more prevalent in other places, but how do we see like persecution today? Like in what ways might we be persecuted for our faith? The enemy trying to discourage us.
Yeah, that's a really good question. That particular one from Acts 4, is that your question? Yeah. That's a great question. I would hesitate to use the word persecuted, but I think that maybe there can be, some of us can experience in various places of our life, some hostility or suspicion of what it is that we do. And some of that's real, some of that's just imagined, as well, but it has the same effect. We can think, gosh, that person doesn't want to hear me talk about Jesus.
I'm going to stay quiet.
Right. Real or not, it has the same effect.
And I think that's just helpful for us to like recognize that the enemy's strategy is to make us afraid of rejection, afraid of how others will treat us, and so that we remain quiet when the Lord has called us to speak. Okay, what kinds of things do you see? Where do we need to be aware of like inner turmoil, disruption, and how that distracts us from what Jesus has called us to do?
Yeah. I mean, when I think about Acts 5 and that particular thing, I do think that the call to holiness is uncomfortable, and like there are both like valid and invalid reasons for conflict, right?
Yeah.
And invalid are things like, party spirit that we see in 1 Corinthians, like I follow this person or I follow that person.
Superiority over one another. Yeah.
Or just an inability to address our own ongoing indwelling sin, and just kind of, and so instead of looking to ourselves, we do what Abraham did in Genesis 20 and say, these other people you put in my life, it's their fault that I lied. Right. So those are invalid reasons. The other valid reasons is that, it's like holiness is good, and so calling ourselves to it, calling other people to it, like that, we should do that humbly. We should do that as those who, are not yet perfected, but, when we think about, for us, those of us who are in various stages of parenting, this is just what we do this instinctually.
Yeah.
We don't say to our kids, well, I guess if you want to make those decisions, my
3-year-old.
Right. Yeah, exactly. No, we say like, no, that's not good for you. That's not good for our family. That's not who we want to be. And so, yeah, I do think holiness, one of the devil's great tricks is to make it seem like it's a burden, and like that God's taking something away from us, but it's beautiful and it's good. Yeah.
I also think about like when in the turmoil within the church and how some, like you said, like some things are not things that we should be in turmoil over or confronting one another over or be divided over. But some things are valuable. And I think about like our sermon series in Galatians, how Paul confronts Peter to his face because he's compromising the gospel, and his willingness to to put himself in a position that would have been uncomfortable, like, because he's not one of the original 12, and he wouldn't have been in the same position that they were in, but he's willing to speak up and say, no, this is important, not just because you're not doing something that's right, but because it puts all these other people at risk. And all these Gentile believers are now going to think that there's something they have to add to Jesus in order to be made right with God, that there are things that are worth standing up for and saying, no, this is worth fighting for, because the gospel is at stake here. Yeah. And I think that we need to be those kinds of people to one another in the church, where we're not afraid of each other, but we're willing to love each other well enough to say, this is dangerous and I'm afraid for you. So I'm going to say something to you because I think this could compromise your understanding of the gospel. And I want the gospel to have its full power within you.
Yeah. That's good. That's
well, and you've kind of already alluded to this, but busyness, that's the easy one. How can we be tempted by this one?
Yeah. I do think, we all live on some level of FOMO, you know, and so it's, we feel, the temptation to just continue adding more things to our plate, forgetting the main things that we have, putting the big rocks in first, as it were.
Yes.
And being comfortable with saying, this is what I'm called to give my heart to, and other things can fit around that.
Yeah, that's right. Having your priorities straight.
And also, there's a level of really wonderful humility and what we might call like right-sizedness to the apostles, when they're just like, you know what, somebody else can do this.
Yeah.
Which when you're in a leadership position, sometimes you're like, you feel like, no, nobody else can do this.
Yeah. And they recognize that they've been called, they can say yes to the one thing they've been called to do well.
Yeah.
And then
that's great.
Other people will say yes to the things they're called to do well. And in that, all the yeses will take care of it because the Spirit's work in us.
That's right. Yeah, that's good.
Well, that's helpful. Yeah. Helpful things for us to think through as we look at the church in its early days in Acts 4, 5, and 6.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Well, there's a hypothetical person out there, Abby, and they're thinking to themselves, oh gosh, this made me realize I haven't been doing my Bible reading plan. And they're asking to themselves a question. They're saying, oh gosh, when's the best day for me to start reading the Bible? What would you say?
Today.
It's today. That's
and
right.
don't try to catch up. Just start where you are. We'll circle back around in 3 years.
Exactly. It'll still be there.
It will still be there. In fact, it's promised that the Word of God will be there to the end.
Exactly. Well, keep reading, but also don't just keep reading.
Also say the Lord's Prayer. Wait, is that
keep
what we're
praying.
Oh, keep praying. I was like, wait, what are you queuing me up for?
Exactly. We'll work on that.
We're working on it. Happy praying.
Thanks for listening to the Signal Pres podcast. I want to thank our extensive production team, beginning with Matt Broom, sound man extraordinaire.
And thank you to Hannah Sutton and Jackie Carpenter for helping us out with all of our technical difficulties and making it possible for you to listen to this podcast.